Good morning, afternoon, and evening, everyone. My name is Kevin McCabe with the National Renewable Energy Laboratory. I'd like to welcome you all to today's webinar, again hosted by the Clean Energy Ministerial's Carbon Capture, Utilization, and Storage, or CCUS initiative. A kind notice that this webinar is being recorded and will be made available following the conclusion of the event. We have a great event lined up today, as this particular webinar is brought to you in collaboration with the World Bank, the Asian Development Bank, and the European Investment Bank. Representatives from these organizations will be discussing multilateral development banks as drivers for CCUS. Lots to get to in just 1 hour, so I'll go ahead and pass things over to the SEM CCUS Initiative Coordinator, Juho Lipponen, who will provide a short intro to the initiative. Juho?
Thank you very much, Kevin, and thank you to you and your colleagues at NREL for hosting our event this morning. It's very early for you over where you are. So dear colleagues and friends, welcome to this webinar on multilateral development banks as drivers for CCUS. I coordinate the Clean Energy Ministerial CCUS initiative, and I would briefly like to introduce the event and our organization. And Kevin, if you can put the next slide up, please. The Clean Energy Ministerial, or the SEM, is a global process to accelerate the deployment of clean energy. SEM has 29 member countries and many other countries participate as well. 90% of clean energy investment happens within these countries, but so do also 3/4 of global CO2 emissions. So this is a very, very relevant global partnership. And check out the website that you see on this slide for more information. Next slide, please. The SEM operates several global work streams on a wide range of clean energy sectors and topics. And as Kevin already said, your host today is the SEM CCUS initiative. We have 13 member countries, and we have a joint objectives to accelerate CCUS together. The initiative is co-led by Norway, Saudi Arabia, the UK, and the United States. Next slide, please. And the way we work to accelerate CCUS is via these 4 main areas of activity that you can see on this slide. Without going through all these, we are essentially a platform to bring together governments, industry, and the finance sector to foster policy development and to form coalitions to drive CCUS opportunities forward. And next slide, please. And indeed, the finance sector, both the public side of it and the commercial side of it, is in a vital position to drive energy transition. In today's session, we will be discussing the role that multilateral development banks, or MDBs, can have in driving and accelerating the deployment of carbon capture, particularly in emerging economies, but also elsewhere. We have 3 key MDBs with us today: the World Bank, Asian Development Bank, and European Investment Bank, all with considerable experience in CCUS already. Today's moderator is Stig Svenningsen, who's Deputy DG at Norway's Ministry of Petroleum and Energy, and Stig is also one of the co-leads of our CCUS initiative. So thank you very much for joining. We hope you enjoy the coming hour, and I will let Stig introduce the panel and take it from here. So over to you, Stig. And Kevin, we can actually take the slides off, so and proceed with that. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin, and thank you, Juho, for that introduction. As you said, I would like to start by warmly welcome our 3 panelists. We have Natalia Kolichenko-Lotz. She's a senior energy specialist at the World Bank. We have Priyanta Vyatunga, Energy Sector Chief at the Asian Development Bank, and Jacek Podkansky is a Senior Engineer at the European Investment Bank. It's great to have you all with us today, and we are really looking forward to this discussion. Today's event is indeed a dialogue among finance sector experts, and this is why we will not be making presentation, but conduct this as a dialogue, as I said. First, I'd like to provide a few framing thoughts for today's discussion. First, all of of all, we take as given the necessity to accelerate the deployment of carbon capture and storage technologies. Their slow uptake is not due to the technology itself, but due to the lack of a viable business case. And when there is no business case, financing is very difficult, and if not impossible. However, we have seen a remarkable change in attention to CCUS across the world. More and more governments, including my own, are creating the conditions under which these business cases can be developed. So there is definitely growing interest. We have also seen this interest grow within the finance community. Our SEM CCUS initiative has been in close dialogue with various kinds of finance sector players over the past 2 years. And we are aware that finance institutions want to learn more and see what role carbon capture and storage can play in their clean energy portfolios. Today, we have gathered a particular set of banks for this discussion, namely the Multilateral Development Banks, or the MDBs. MDBs often work with emerging economies and can be more than just a bank in many ways. They can play a catalyzing role in preparing a country for the uptake of CCUS. We will in fact spend the next hour discussing exactly this particular role of that the MDBs can play. We will go through a number of themes, and I will list them now. So first, the MDB's role as a catalyst and what that includes. The bank's experience and current activity in the field of CCUS. The future, how to move forward towards large-scale investments in CCUS and what role MDBs can play here. We will hopefully also have time for some discussion on the role of governments as donors in the MDB's activities, as well as how industry and investors can work with development banks. But before we get into the mentioned themes, let's start with a short round of introductions by each of the panelists. Natalia, Prianta, and Jacek, could you all give a 3-minute overview of where CCUS sits in your bank's clean energy portfolio, and perhaps also give a brief overview of your past experiences with CCUS? You might also want to touch on if there are any so-called no-go areas, like coal or gas-fired power plants, fossil fuels, etc. But let's not go into the future yet in these first interventions, but and have a more general introduction. I will first give the floor to you, Natalia. So Natalia, please, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Stephen. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. I'm Natalia Kolushenko-Lutz. I'm sector leader for sustainable development in infrastructure in the South Asia Department of the World Bank. At the same time, I'm the manager of the CCUS Trust Fund in the bank, which finances CCUS activities in all departments of the bank. So where we are, just shortly, where CCUS sits in the World Bank. It's been a long journey for us. Our CCUS Trust Fund was established back in 2009. And I was involved since 2009 in these operations. And it's been a slow but steady improvement. However, we are still not kind of picking up on big scale. We did a lot of work in the beginning, then it was a little bit slowed down, and right now it's picking up. The good news that recently the World Bank approved its climate change action plan, and CCUS is mentioned as one of the mitigation technologies which are considered as climate change in the climate change agenda. So we are engaged in various regional departments. We are working in Africa, we are working in Mexico. We do some work also in Asia, although very limited at this time. And again, our engagement, which varies from working on regulatory studies to actually accelerate and initiating projects, even with the private sector, just recently, like we did in Nigeria. Maybe I'll come to this later when we will be discussing specific how we can engage with the governments and the private sector. Thank you. Over to Priyant.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Natalia. Good to see you. I don't know whether you can remember me, and we were working together almost 13, 14 years ago back in ADB. Thank you. Nice to see you. Thank you very much for inviting ADB for this discussion. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all of you, wherever you are joining from. As a development finance institution, we have been working in CCUS like the World Bank technology since 2009 and have been active contributors to the promotion of CCUS. During this period, we have been involved in, of course, mostly capacity development activities like organizing conferences, the training programs, preparing pre-feasibility studies, assisting in regulatory framework preparation and organizing study tours, and creating institutional framework like the Centers of Excellence on CCUS. And for this, of course, we also provide a grant, provided grants to feasibility study or pilot project in some Asian countries. Let me talk a bit about the recent policy level decisions or policy level interventions we have had. We, as probably most of you all know, we revised the energy policy recently. We put out to 2021 energy policy in October last year. And the policy has specifically stated that the emerging technologies like CCUS can all play a role in transitioning to business areas that are more difficult to decarbonize. And in the context of carbon neutrality, obviously ADB intends to help the DMCs to reach their goals, and CCUS is considered as one of the important technologies which needs to come in when it comes to decarbonization efforts and carbon neutrality. And if you look at the energy policy paragraph 77 specifically deals with CCUS, and in exact words, what it says is that ADB will support CCUS technologies for power plants, LNG import facilities, and industries. ADB will continue to provide capacity development, technical assistance, finance, and regulatory advice in support of DMC programs to identify and remove hurdles to development, demonstration, and commercialization of CCUS systems. Of course, coming to the fact that when it comes to supporting CCUS, there is one caveat. That is, ADB will not engage in enhanced oil recovery projects involving CCUS. So that's something which I need to state here. With that, I stop here. Of course, as Natalia said, we will be dealing with all sorts of other issues as we go along. Thank you very much. Let me pass it down to EBRD. Sorry.
Jacek. Thank you. Hello, my name is Jacek Podkacki. I am delighted to participate in this webinar. I represent the European Investment Bank. The objective of my intervention is to convey the message that the EIB is prepared to lend to CCS projects outside EU, and there is a political will to do this. The resources are available as well as necessary tools and expertise. First, a couple of words about our general eligibility criteria for CCS. They are stemming from our energy lending policy, which is going to be revised this year. However, there will be no change concerning CCS. And also from Climate Bank roadmap. We provide loans. CCUS is eligible for electricity and heat generation projects and in industrial projects. In heat and power projects, the condition is that its application needs to result in maximum 250 grams of CO2 per kilowatt hour of electricity. The project may include a new fossil fuel fired power plant and also be a retrofit of existing plant by equipping it with capture installation. So we don't exclude new gas or coal plants unless they fulfill this threshold 250 due to application of CCS. In industrial projects, it's more complicated. CCS is eligible under the innovation window. There are generally no problems with equipping existing installations with CCS. However, financing of new industrial facilities with CCS may face some problems. All this depends on what kind of industrial facility is this and where it is located. We can also finance CO2 transportation projects and storage projects alone, with capture outside project boundaries. Of course, CO2 stream needs to be ensured in this case, but the storage project can be implemented by somebody else. Carbon capture and utilization projects eligibility is the most tricky here. It's analyzed on a case-by-case basis and depends on project's lifetime CO2 savings. It means that we need a life cycle assessment for such projects. Here there are clear no-goes though. Also, we follow ADB here. For example, enhanced oil recovery or enhanced gas recovery are not eligible. We would finance CCS today much the same as any other energy or industrial project. It would be mostly senior debt with either project finance or corporate risk. But also other financing arrangements are possible. We could deal with both states and with private companies as beneficiaries of our loans. So this is in a nutshell what we have on the table. Thank you.
Thank you all for this introduction and remarks. I think this is a very good start for the rest of our discussion, and also the first theme, which is the MDB's role as catalysts for CCUS deployment. You all touched a bit upon this in your interventions, and I think we should dig a bit deeper into this topic. So what most of us think about when you think of MDBs is that they are set apart from most commercial banks because you have also ability to help prepare the ground for the energy transition. So it would be great to hear from all of you some more detail about this catalyst role that you can play. I will list a bit 4 kind of themes that you can touch upon as you please. So if you can comment on your bank's role in driving legal, regulatory, and policy changes, funding pilot scale projects, funding storage assessments, and funding of FEED studies or similar. So I think I will go in the same round as before. So I will start with the World Bank and Natalia, please, and then we will go Asian Bank and then the European Investment Bank. Natalia.
Thank you, Stig. Yeah. Yes, indeed, that actually was the idea when the trust fund for CCS was created at the World Bank with the help of government of Norway, government of the United Kingdom, and earlier the CCS Institute of Australia. The idea was exactly to create the background, the conditions for CCS development in our client countries. When we started the trust fund, we went very kind of wide scale. We appealed to all our regional departments and asked which client countries would like to be interested to strengthen capacity on CCS, and it was quite a strong response. 11 countries, we completed the screening for CCS potential. After this, we moved to so-called phase 2, when we selected 2 countries, which included CCS in their climate change policy or NDS, and that was South Africa and Mexico. In both countries, we completed a very comprehensive legal review and regulatory review. So the idea was first to find gaps in the existing regulations, which would allow the countries to implement pilot projects, but at the same time to prepare either amendments to their existing regulations or new regulations. So that was a very comprehensive analysis, which was, I think, published even at some point as our deliverable, and the countries are pursuing its implementation, because at this stage, the role of the World Bank is limited. We are not drafting regulations for the country; it's their own responsibility, but we advise what are the gaps. Based on these assessments, we prepare especially specific operations, which are more tailored for each country in Mexico and South Africa. As you know, South Africa doesn't have any oil and gas natural resources at scale, so their geological knowledge is very limited. our pilot project in South Africa, co-financed also by the government of South Africa, in the amount about 50% funding comes from the government and 50% from the World Bank Trust Fund, is to assess the geological conditions for injection of CO2 in geological formations in South Africa, which was actually preceded by the completion of a geological storage atlas in South Africa. So this project is ongoing. It probably will be completed about a year and a half from now. But also, I mean, South Africa will also do a pre-feasibility or pre-FEED study, and followed by FEED study implemented by our partners on the capture CO2 capture in one of the largest coal power plants already existing in South Africa. So basically, it's pure mitigation activity. So this will be implemented if financing of our trust fund does not allow to go to install a capture plant, but we might collaborate with the utility ESCOM in terms of pre-FEED study, and if we find financing, and if they want to actually take financing from the World Bank, it might be considered. So far, it's a little bit too far to discuss this. But again, all what we're doing in South Africa, as you mentioned, it exactly goes under the largest theme of energy transition. We do energy efficiency, we do renewables, several activities. So CCS is only one of the energy transition activities. And in Mexico, we also pursue industrial decarbonization. We are working with the Ministry of Energy, but also with the Ministry of Environment, who is in charge of climate change agenda in Mexico. And we are looking at steel and cement industries where we can screen and propose some projects which might have CCS potential. So this work is also ongoing. Another very exciting work which we just started was the private sector, and it's actually a request came from the government of Nigeria to help them to build their capacity on CCS. And because, again, coming back a little bit to your previous comment, what is the areas of no-go, and you might know that our donors have limitations with engaging, allowing the World Bank and maybe ADB to engage in fossil fuels. So we concentrated in Nigeria on industrial sectors. And in this, for this activity, we partnered with our private sector arm, International Finance Corporation, which with our support, with the support from the World Bank CCS Trust Fund, engage in the defining CCS projects in industrial sectors in Nigeria. So it looks very promising, and we hope we will get results very soon. Thank you. Over.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Following Natalia, let me say that quite frankly, the challenges for CCUS is huge. Everybody understands this because it's a new technology, and when it comes to deployment of technology, you have lots of challenges which you face. ADB has worked very closely with countries like PRC, Indonesia, India, Pakistan, Mongolia, Vietnam. And each of these countries are unique when it comes to certain circumstances. They are country specific and development perspective, political system, international commitments, and conducive circumstances to implement CCUS project. They're all different and country specific, and hence these countries are expected to be treated, independently, as they come. As ADB's experience, ADB has worked to raise awareness among the stakeholders through conferences and knowledge products, and help them in preparing CCUS regulations, design CCUS projects, and create conducive environment. These activities will be obviously designed by ADB as per the country. As I said, they are unique for each of those countries. However, the real issue will be about CO2 storage, which will have no financial returns. And substantial investment needs to be made to measure the storage capacity with each of these countries without expecting any returns. That's a major challenge which all of us have to overcome. And raising financial resources for such projects is important for the DMC, and they will look at ADB for probable support. The governments or DMCs can consider things like establishing carbon credits taxes to promote CCUS, and perhaps set aside a part of the tax funds for storage evaluation. ADB will, of course, be happy to work with these governments in these areas. ADB can also work closely with the government and finance community on creating risk mitigation tools for CCUS projects and make these projects bankable. ADB will prepare the financial institutes in DMCs to understand, which is very important, understand the emerging technologies and economic elements. Training, of course, will be one of the components. And in addition, ADB can assist creating risk mitigation instruments, such as insurance products and refinance facilities. And also it can work with the donors, other donors like the World Bank and others, to create set aside specific CCUS financing facility, which can be utilized specifically as CCUS. One more area of ADB will be able to work creation of common CO2 pipeline infrastructure. In fact, a bank like us and like the World Bank, we have been working very much with transmission infrastructure, both electricity and gas. So we have all the capacity to provide these DMCs, to put up common pipeline infrastructure. The experience gained in this, dealing with their regulations, financing, and management can be put to use in this common CO2 infrastructure. So these are some of the areas where probably banks like us can come in and help to get CCUS deployment catalyzed. Thank you.
I don't have a lot to say, unfortunately. Right now, we could give a loan, even a large one, to all kinds of CCS projects outside EU. There is, however, no direct financing line for CCS-related technical assistance also so far. We don't offer investment grants to support pilot projects, but all these might become available in the very near future with the activities of the new EIB development branch, which is named EIB Global, established this year, which is going to become a key partner of European Commission in financing development outside EU. And we expect even more guarantees to our loans from the Commission outside EU. And we also expect some technical assistance and also investment grants. There is an issue of bringing private investment here. First, our loan may help to close the budget of the project, if needed. Second, once we are involved in the project, the private investors can be sure that we performed thorough due diligence using our experts, and that the project makes sense. Thank you.
Thank you all. I think we may pick up on some of these issues as we go along as well, but I will, in the interest of time, trying to run through at least the different themes, and then we can come back to certain issues at the end here. So we will then move on to talk a little bit about the bank's current funds and where to go from here, because as both Natalia and Priyanta at least talked about, you have been around for a while, and these funds have been around for a while. So one question would be, what is the status of the current funds? And I understand that they are also developing in the sense that they are being depleted after a while. Are there plans for replenishments or any process planned for extending or, and as I said, get more funding to the funds? Jacek also mentioned something about new instruments that the EIB is looking into. So what other instruments could the banks use to prepare a country for CCUS? I think I will do the reverse order here, since Jacek started by talking about the new EB Global. So if you can talk a little bit about that as well, Jacek, that will be very nice. So please, Jacek, you start. Then we go to Natalia and Priyanka.
I'm afraid not really everything is in the very early stages of development. The EB Global was created like a month ago. So I have no ideas. We have some experience with innovation projects with hydrogen and with TA and also investment grants, but so this could be repeated. But right now, nothing to share. Once it is, I know more, I will convey the message to everybody interested, of course.
Natalia, please.
So, sorry, Stig, you want me to go or Priya?
Oh, sorry. Yes, I reversed the order now. If you want, you can start, and then we will give the floor to Priyanka. Sorry about that. Natalia.
Okay. Okay. On our end, I mentioned that we are currently, just to give you a time scale, we started in 2009 as the same as ADB. So our trust fund, which has ability to provide grants, is a very long one. And at the moment, I mentioned that our active projects in Nigeria, Mexico, and South Africa, which are kind of expensive projects, but everything what we have in the trust fund right now more or less is programmed. We have one more activity which is called industrial decarbonization, and again, but it's rather a study, screening and identification of projects than investment on a specific project, given the time limitation which we have, because our trust fund is closing in December 2023, with the exception of the South Africa program, which requires longer time frame. So we agreed with the donors it can go until August 2024. But at this time, we don't have, our internal procedures do not allow us to extend. It's been extended several times. And secondly, we believe, we had kind of some strategic discussions within the bank that basically we do need still support for CCS. It still did not pick up, and only right now it's more interest from developing countries started coming in. We kind of spent more than 10 years generating this interest, and right now it is. And from the developing countries standpoint, although we provide funds as the same as ADB, but grant funds only for very least developed countries. So grants can be provided for this kind of technology only through the instrument of trust fund, which can be limited exactly to the technology specific activities. But generally, we provide grants based on the economic conditions of the country and only for development needs. So in our view, this support is absolutely essential to continue. We might kind of broaden this its scope to include other technologies like blue hydrogen, everything what relate to the decarbonization, energy transition, and with the in combination with CCS. What instruments we have for this? Again, it's right now our instruments are designed to support economic development of countries and not specific technologies. So they provide loans, again, depending on the status of the country. For more advanced economies, it's loans. For the least advanced economies, especially in Africa, it's grants. But again, the governments have make a rough choice, either to use the grants from the World Bank for their economic or social programs, which are essential for them, or for the use of technology, such advanced technologies for them as CCS. And of course, I know it's a rough choice to make, and usually they prefer to do social programs, education, health, and so on. So that's why I'm saying an additional is required. We also provide support for the private sector. We provide guarantees in order to reduce the risk of investment of the private sector. So far, we did not apply it for CCS, but in general, such instruments are available if there are private sector companies which are interested to invest in developing countries, and that's usually how we support them in cooperation with our, as I said, private sector, our international finance corporations. So that's what we have. We want to finish our 3 big projects before our trust fund closes, and definitely we'll start discussing with the donors and what is next. Thank you. To you, Priya.
Thank you, Natalia. It's good to come last because most of the things have been already said. Yes, so I just agree with you. I mean, on most of these points. In fact, CCUS will play a very important role when it comes to our decarbonization efforts. There's no doubt, because existing coal fleet, existing fossil fuel plants will have to be treated some way or the other, and we have to find a way to get this carbon dioxide, out and kept it somewhere or utilized. If you really need to go for carbon neutrality within by 2050. And so it plays a very important role. At the same time, if you look at the current state of development, a lot of work needs to be done to develop capacity in this sector, particularly in developing member countries. And most of this capacity development and confidence building activities need a long gestation period, particularly in developing countries. As Natalia said, their priorities may be slightly different than what our priorities are. Therefore, we really need to put in a lot of efforts. And so naturally, banks like us will have to look for more and more concessionary financing or grant financing from our partners. And at the moment, as far as ADB's, CCUS funds are concerned, we are going to, it's depleting very fast, and all our funds will finish by the end of this year. That's how it's going to be. So in fact, we had to curtail some of the work which we had planned beyond 2022 because of the lack of funds beyond 2022 or lack of commitments from our current, partners. So we are really looking at replenishment of our CCUS funds, if possible, and diversify it to other partners to ensure that we can continue this exercise and make sure that eventually we will get real projects off the ground and help eventually the decarbonization efforts. As we know, without CCUS, I don't think we can really think of carbon neutrality by 2050. That's what we believe in. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Can I follow up on both of the last 2 interventions here, because it seems that as you both said, that the funds are closing or are being depleted. Is there any process, or how will the process be if we want to continue having funds under your institution? So can you say a little bit also about the replenishing process and the process for doing what you described on getting more funding for CCS through your funds? We can do in reverse. We will start with you, Priyanta.
Okay, I start off straight. Yes. Yeah, good, great. Yes, from our side, actually, our CCUS fund sits in what is called Clean Energy Financing Partnership Facility. And so we have annual consultations to replenish this facility or various trust funds under this facility. And Norway is one of the partners in multi-donor facility, if I can remember right. And then you have most of the other governments also sitting in there in the multi-donor fund for clean energy. And in the CCUS fund at the moment, I think we have the UK government, and we had Australia CCS Institute, and in the past, but at the moment it's only the government of UK sitting there in the CCUS fund. So we will, in this annual consultation process, we usually request or make requests and discuss with individual possible donors, possible partners, and then we take it from there. That's what we usually do. Of course, we can separately approach these partners even before the annual consultation process we have. That's how we usually handle that. Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Natalia.
From our end, it's almost the same process, but when you said it's finished, just recently the World Bank had a trust fund reform, which again does not allow us to extend the trust fund, but allow us to open a new one under an umbrella of trust fund, which we have, for instance, under the energy sector management program. We have an umbrella trust fund that's about like 20-25 trust funds sitting there. And again, it would be good again to start with the consultation, the same with Priya mentioned, with the donors. What is this scope can be, what is interest in which activities to invest, in bank executed or recipient executed or both, what is the focus, and to define what resources are available in the time frame and what is expected from deliverables. That's usually how we do it. The process of setting trust fund is not very lengthy, as long as we agree in advance what we want to achieve and what funds would be available for that. Thank you.
Thank you. Jacek, it seems to me a bit that the EIB is in a little bit different situation, but just for, I see there's a lot of at least Asian participants in this workshop. Can you just explain a little bit about how the funds and the guidance given to the EIB is compared to the World Bank and the Asian Development Bank?
We can give loans to all developing nations in Asia, all over the world, actually. We have guarantees from the Commission that cover major risks for these projects. We have mandates to operate there. So entire world, developing world is on our radar screens. And we can do normal loans, or we can do corporate loans, project finance. Everything is on offer. And with global, I'm sure that there will be more instruments developed. But right now it's too early to talk about them.
Okay, thank you. It will be very interesting to follow. I will move on then a bit to large-scale CCUS investment and what is needed in your view. So we have heard about the experiences that you have with CCS and the abilities you have for funding CCUS, but CCUS projects are usually very big and very expensive, or takes often in $1 billion scale. What do you think is required for a step change in the role of MDBs funding projects of this magnitude going forward? Is there a role for the MDBs in these huge projects? Or should that be more in the focus of commercial finance institutions? And also a little bit on that, I think Jacek also touched upon this, and all of you did actually. What conditions do you work on to collaborate with other banks, not just development banks, but commercial banks? I think I will start with you, Jacek, since you were the last one talking, and then we will go to Natalia.
Okay, thank you. So, well, large-scale investment requires a big pot of money, and part of this pot may need to come in the form of a loan. And we can play a role of a game changer for large-scale projects, as we can provide large loans with relatively long tenor. Of course, the condition is bankability of project. This is the main issue. For such loans outside EU, we use guarantees provided by the Commission, as I mentioned, and these guarantees cover significant part of risks, if not all of them. What makes the loans potentially attractive, I mean, the interest is small. And we always try to collaborate with other financing institutions, MDBs, and also private financing institutions. It's not a problem at all. We would, of course, work together with others by sharing due diligence, for example. Thank you.
Thank you, Jacek. Natalia?
Yeah, thank you. What would take, since we have been involved in CCS for well, more than a decade right now, what I can tell you that the CCS projects are not right now commercially viable as such. Without having a carbon market or price on CO2, it's very difficult to make it commercially viable without subsidies, without these grants, And these grants can come, in millions, given the scale of CCS. So that, definitely moving, in development of carbon markets or regulatory requirements, national would really help with this. But again, coming back to the nature of our clients, now our clients are developing countries, that maybe enforcement of CO2 restrictions on power generation or other activities will be too economically punishable for them. So maybe the price of CO2 and global carbon trade would definitely help. From our end, we of course provide loans, very discount loans. Again, it depends on a specific situation in a specific country. I mean, how low we go. We and our loans very long tenure, 25 years. But again, project should be economically viable to some extent. It's not only for CCS. So it's usually we provide large loans for multiple activities which improve, for instance, electrical systems. We don't provide any longer loans for power generation, for fossil fuels, only renewables. But again, it depends on each country. We can discuss. We also, as the EIB, we provide guarantee instruments. Our guarantees are coming in different forms. From the World Bank, we can guarantee the payments. We can guarantee loans. From the private sector, we can provide guarantees for political risk, for non-payment risk. We have several institutions, which together with the World Bank, one of I already mentioned the IFC, International Finance Corporation, but we also have MIGA, Multilateral Investment Guarantee Agency, which also provide coverage for various types of guarantees and instabilities. So again, now to take it in a larger scale, it's definitely requires much higher levels than MDBs It's global markets play a big role. But as soon as the global market moves, we can pick it up, especially with support of our donors. What is also important from our side is that our donors, because we kind of between the client's demand and the donors' supply of money, so to say, and also guidance to the World Bank, that our donors are very explicit that such institutions as World Bank, ADB, need to provide support for technologies like CCS. So it's not forgotten. It's not kind of hidden under energy efficiency, which is absolutely important, and renewable energy, but not forgotten among other technologies. And the signal from our donors at the world level or to our client countries is also important. Thank you.
Thank you, Natalia. And Prianta, are you still with us?
Yes, I am. I'm sorry that I don't want to switch on my video because of the bandwidth issues, because I have a power interruption. I fully agree with both EIB and World Bank. In fact, the kind of instruments, financial instruments they have are almost like what we have anyway. So we have more or less similar financial instruments to support. But at the end of the day, all of us agree, this technology, the deployment of this technology at large scale require economic and financial viability. Economic viability is definitely there, no doubt about it, because of the nature of the intervention, that the requirement to address climate change challenge and so on and so forth. But when it comes to financial viability, you really need to buy down the cost of investments, and the returns associated with it will have to be coming in. That means basically we have to look at low-cost funds, grants, large scale, and how to buy down the risks and so on to make sure the financial costs become much lower than what it is now. So we need to rely on certain resources like green climate funds and other climate funds at low cost, the low cost resources. And when it comes to working with each other, of course, what it means is that MDBs have a very big role to play. And I don't think we can leave it just for commercial financing. And I think it takes a longer time for that to come, and we need to come in some form or the other to support such commercial financing to come. And then, of course, when it comes to in large projects, the World Bank, EIB, and all of us have worked together in large projects when it comes to hydro, when it comes to large, in the past, even coal-fired power plants, even gas-fired power plants, we have worked very closely with each other because most of our, the policies are aligned, safeguard requirements are aligned, and all of us are looking things like Paris alignment, common guidelines on GHG emission, calculations, finance, climate financing, and so on and so forth. So all of us are more or less working together, and we can easily come work together in large projects and towards achieving a common goal, that is to get CO2 reductions in the atmosphere as much as possible. So I think there is nothing to stop us collaborating with each other. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Can I ask also, there is of course a new kid on the block that we have not been talking about, but what do you see as a role for you collaborating with the Green Climate Fund, which is now on at least most of the donors' lips, I would say, do you have see any role for the Green Climate Fund in this? I am fully aware that you are not the Green Climate Fund, but as an existing and a long-standing institutions that have a lot of experience in this field, what is your view on this? Do you have any, Jacek?
No, not really.
Natalia?
Yeah, actually, we did approach the Green Climate Fund. We had a few session consultation with them. Although it's not prohibited to finance CCS in the GCF. However, the interest of donors, again, is limited by internal policies on engaging in fossil fuels. So when we talk to GCF about this ethanol, the easiest part of CCS would be direct air capture, not related to anything else. And you know that we are talking about financial and economic viabilities. These projects are very far from any viability, again, unless there is a carbon market established. So that's what our experience so far. Again, we are open if they want to finance anything related to either industrial sector or power sector, we would be open, but so far we did not make a breakthrough. Thank you.
Yeah, from my side, we have had some experience with working with GCF, of course, in clean energy side and adaptation side, not so much on things like this where we have to work with the fossil fuel, systems. And I think in that sense, this is my personal opinion, that I think there should be a paradigm shift in looking at this fossil fuel system, because as all of us know, these are sitting, stagnant, assets, and we have to deal with it, and they will be in operation for many years to come. And if you really look at getting carbon dioxide emissions reduced from the power sector, you really need to do something about it, which means I think we have to think slightly differently, not just think only about energy efficiency and clean energy, but this is part of clean energy, and I think we need to look at that. And I think in that sense, we need to have some interaction, little more interaction with institutions like GCF. Yes.
Thank you. That's very interesting. I think that you probably also heard that it's common for what you said, Prianta, that many in the climate change negotiations are talking about we should reduce the emissions. We should not necessarily remove any sources. So that means that this discussion is still a very much a live discussion in many fora. So I think this is something that we will have with us for a long time. I think we need to go in for a close soon. Unfortunately, we can probably continue for several hours here. But I will ask 2 questions that you can answer at the end here. We have touched upon this, but again, do you have any advice for governments on steering the multilateral finance institutions, and how the governments, what are the roles that the government should take and what should they do next? And how can industry and investors work with MDBs? That are the 2 questions. I know they could fill an hour, but if you can briefly touch upon this at the end, then we will go in for a close. I will start with you, Jacek.
All these buttons, yes, okay. So when it comes to, I have very general plea for governments. They should create an enabling environment for CCS. And this, of course, includes appropriate regulatory framework. CO2 emissions need a price. Even high CO2 emission price does not guarantee financial viability of CCS project. Still, some grants will be needed, but as an incentive, CO2 emissions need to cost some money, definitely, everywhere. When it comes to advice on how work with us, again, simple advice, please contact us at early project development phase. We might be able to help to develop it, and it will also help to avoid creating showstoppers for our financing, showstoppers related to the environment and also to procurement. We need to be involved very early before anything is decided on how investors want to proceed. Thank you.
Thank you, Jacek. Priyanta, please.
Yeah, Jacek. There is nothing much to add to what Jacek has already said. Basically, the government's role is to ensure that such investments can happen and financially viable. That can happen only if there is a price for carbon, and that needs to be brought in. And then, of course, the regulatory environment required, particularly when it comes to hard to abate sectors, we really need CCUS to come, and like cement and steel, for instance. And so I think the government intervention is very much required, and we can provide all the support to bring in those policy and regulatory interventions as much as possible. Thank you.
Thank you. And Natalia?
Yeah, not to repeat, I know what correctly said Jacek and Priya. Actually, I would distinguish government and all the client governments which implement, from our standpoint, it's our client in developing countries, exactly to create an enabling environment, including policy decisions on CO2. Not many developing countries has policy decision on restrictions on CO2. Create, again, regulatory frameworks and maybe even incentives, the same which even developing countries have for renewable energy. Auctions and all would work and all, anything to reduce the price of such projects. From the donor governments, again, I repeat, for MDB, for instance, since they are our donors, express the support for this technology at the highest level in our institutions, because it's very important. We are at the operational level following the guidance of our donors. And if the donors are not interested or kind of silent, we don't have the right signal at the operational level to engage with the clients, with our clients. And also important for donor governments also to create financing mechanisms, because again, if we recall the history of energy efficiency and renewable energy, everything started with support of incentives from the donor countries. Thank you.
Thank you all. I think we are now on the clock here, so I think I should try and I was supposed to try and sum up this very rich discussion. It's a lot has been discussed. I think I will be very simple in the summary here and use the words from you, Natalia, saying that it will be very important going forward that the governments and the donors and the owners, so to speak, of the multilateral banks need to start expression at the highest level, the need for CCUS in the policy mix, and then move from there. A second point that I've noted, you all said this very clearly, that we need to work with the goal of having a price on emissions again. This is an old, of course, story, but still, as it's a very important one. And it will be very interesting following the work of your three institutions going forward. As Jacek explained, they are now embarking on the new EIB Global, and we will see and follow that very closely and see what that will bring to the table here. Natalia and Prianta also talked about the end of the current trust funds and how this must be taken forward within the banks going forward, and that there will be starting a dialogue with donors and governments on how to do this in the best possible way. With that, I think I will thank you all for this very interesting discussion, and I hope we can have another one later on, maybe in a year, and then we will have more news on all of these issues. So by that, I give the floor back to you, Kevin, I think, for the close.
Yes, thanks everyone. We'll go ahead and close the webinar. Appreciate it, the lively discussion, and Stig to you as well for moderating and hosting. This concludes the webinar. Thank you, everyone.